here. Okay. The light went away, but it should come back. Cool. Hello everyone. I hope we are visible and audible. Hi Sandeep. Welcome back. So we'll wait for 2 minutes so that people could join in.
Sure.
Yep, 9 people are watching, so everything looks fine.
Cool.
Hello random programming. I'm pretty sure that's not your real name, but yeah. Cool. So yeah, welcome back everyone. This is episode 4 and today we have on the show Harminder, and he is the creator of AdonisJS. Yeah. Over to you, Harminder. Why don't you introduce yourselves?
Sure. So, as like you already mentioned that I'm the creator of a node framework called AdonisJS. I'm Harminder Virk, and I've been writing code for like last 12 years. And I created AdonisJS back in 2015. Then went full time working on the framework in 2020. Since then, my day job is to like actually maintain the framework and add new features to it. Recently, we did a release on 24th of this month, and it's a new major version after 4 years called Adonis V6. And today we are just going to explore the framework, build something really simple with it, and see how exactly it works.
Sounds good. So yeah, we'll have more questions as we go. So people, if you have any questions, you can drop them in the chat. I'm like observing it constantly. And before we begin, one question: why did you create AdonisJS? What was your intention behind it?
Yeah, so there is like some backstory to it. When I started writing code back in 2011 or 12, I was using PHP, as like many people started with PHP in that time. And somewhere around 2014, I got introduced to a PHP framework called Laravel. And I worked with Laravel for 1 year. It was Laravel 4 at that time, or 3. I'm not pretty sure. And then I switched jobs, and I got the opportunity to work in Node.js. And when I started working in Node.js, the ecosystem of framework was like really different. All the frameworks were like micro frameworks where they give you a routing library and nothing else, and you have to like pretty much set up everything from the scratch. Be it deciding how you want to store the files, which packages you want to use. So you basically have to like make a lot of decisions in doing that. And I was someone who actually used Laravel in the past, which is a batteries included framework. And when I switched to Node, I was really struggling. I really craved using Laravel. So I thought, okay, let's build something which is similar to Laravel. The idea was not to like build a framework which is right now, but it was simply to have something for myself that I can use to kickstart new projects. And these can be
Like a
side projects
boilerplate,
or
right?
yeah, basically something like that. But that eventually got iterated, and now we have Adonis.
Nice. Is there a story behind the name as well?
There is like not a huge story behind it. It was like a Slack group of the company, and I asked someone, okay, I want to start a new open source project. It should be around beauty and elegance. And someone suggested, hey, you can use the name Adonis, which felt very easy to pronounce and I would say very different. So I just decided to use it. That's like the story behind it.
Cool. Interesting name. That's why I asked. Sounds
Yeah,
different.
yeah, yeah, it does.
Cool. So how does this compare to something like Express.js? Because I have worked with, I don't know, before I joined Frappe, I did a college project with Node.js, and the Only go to like tutorial that I found was with Express.js. I guess
Yeah.
4 years back.
So yeah, so Express has its root with the rise of Node.js. So like when Node.js was created, it was becoming popular. Express was created at the same time, and it is still a great framework, but it falls into a different category. For example, Express is a micro framework, and essentially it is basically a routing library in which you can define the routes, and then you can define how do you want to handle those routes as a request comes in, and that's pretty much all. If you have to do anything else on top of it, you have to bring in more packages, and these will like usually be community based packages, but then you also have to spend a lot of time figuring out, okay, which package should I use or which package should I not use. And also you have to decide how do you want to structure your application, which folder should I create, where should I save everything. And if you're working in a team, you will realize that you are literally spending weeks just discussing about these things, because everyone is like going to have their own different opinions. Whereas AdonisJS falls into the category of batteries included or opinionated frameworks, and it makes a lot of opinions for you. So when you start building an app with AdonisJS, everything is like pre-decided for you, and you can quickly get into the building mode versus like assembling everything for 2 days and then writing the first line of code for the feature that you actually want to build.
Makes
So
sense.
that's like the major difference. Both have their pros and cons. Maybe for some people micro framework sticks more, and for some people batteries included framework sticks more. So it's kind of a personal preference as well.
Makes sense. So yeah, let's start working on what's the agenda for today. What are we building?
Yeah, sure. So I was thinking to build a really simple expense management application. And the idea is not to focus on the application or its feature set, but to use the application as a way to learn more about the framework and the ecosystem surrounding it.
Makes sense.
Uh, let Yeah, so let me actually like share my screen and give you an overview of the tools and the frameworks I'm planning to use.
Cool. Your screen is visible, by the way.
Okay, cool. That's nice. So, very first, we are going to use AdonisJS, which is like the backend framework, which is going to power like the main chunk of our application, be it authentication, writing stuff to the database, handling requests, and all that stuff. Then we will be using Tailwind CSS. Tailwind is a CSS framework. I think a lot of people already know about it. If not, then essentially this framework gives you a lot of utility classes, as you can see in this example out here. So instead of like writing all the CSS on how a card looks like, you can drop these classes on a div or on any element, and these classes will like change individual properties of that element. So if you want to change the width, you want to change the height, you have like individual classes for that. So we are going to use Tailwind CSS for that. If you don't want to use Tailwind CSS, usually with AdonisJS, you can do that. It's not like you have to use Tailwind CSS.
Cool. Makes sense.
And then we are going to use Unpoly. Now, before I talk about Unpoly, maybe I can introduce it via HTMX. I think a lot of people knows about HTMX because it's really popular these days. And be it HTMX, Unpoly, and there is another one called Hotwire, which is really popular in the Rails ecosystem. All
Yeah, I
these
think this
frameworks,
hotwire thing is used by this Basecamp people, if I
yeah,
recall
yeah,
correctly. Yeah.
yeah. It's like really popular in the Rails community. But essentially, all these three frameworks let you convert your standard HTML pages and your standard HTML navigation, where whenever you click on a link, a whole page reload happens, into an SPS style navigation, where when you click on a link, it's not a full page reload. You just like replace a section of the web page, and then you can use different features to let's say just replace one part of the web page and not the entire web page. And you can also handle forms in the same way. So essentially, you get these really quick page navigations and fragment updates on a web page without using a full-blown front-end framework and doing all the state management on the front end with these frameworks. I won't be using HTMX because I've been using Unpoly for a while and it really like sticks with me. So I will go with Unpoly in this video.
Cool.
And yeah, that's pretty much how everything looks like. And I think we can get started with
Yeah, let's
creating a new
build.
project and see how it goes.
Cool.
Okay, I'll go to the documentation, which is this website, and I'll go to the installation section. Out here, you can copy this command to create a new project. That is what I will do. And hit enter. Let's cancel it and rename Hello World to Expense Management.
Can you zoom in a bit to your terminal?
Is it better now?
Yep.
Okay.
Thanks.
Cool. Let me also zoom in my browser a little bit, if that helps. So anytime you create a new project, you will be given an option to select one of these 3 starter kits. And a starter kit is essentially a boilerplate, or I would say the default project structure that you get when you're creating a new AdonisJS application. And depending upon the kind of application you are building, you can choose between these 3. The API starter kit is helpful when you're creating a JSON API server. The web starter kit is when you want to build a server rendered application, meaning you are going to render the templates on the back end. You're going to use sessions for authentication and all that stuff. And Slim is when you don't want all the bells and whistles from the framework. You just need the framework core. And from there on, you will decide how you want to structure your app and which packages you want to use. But we will go with the web starter kit. And then it will ask you, do you want to install the dependencies? Let's say yes. It will start the installation process.
Cool. So what package are you using for this CLI?
We use a homegrown CLI framework called ACE. So if I go to the documentation, here you can find like what is ACE and how it works. And we are using this to build this CLI. And then also we have a CLI embedded within the framework, and that's also powered by ACE.
Nice.
Okay, so it's going to install dependencies, which might take a couple of minutes.
That's fine. So where are you based out of? Like before you started working on Adonis full time, what was your day job look like?
Yeah, so I was working with Paytm before I started AdonisJS. In fact, like I started AdonisJS within Paytm, and then I started working for a company called Kayako, which was based out of Gurgaon, and then I left Kayako in 2018. I went to Germany for 6 months to work on a project. Then I came back, worked with a couple of friends, and then I went full time on AdonisJS.
Makes sense. Cool.
Okay, that's done. Now the installation process will also set up Lucid. Lucid is the ORM that AdonisJS uses. And then it's also going to configure the auth layer. All right, that's done. We will cd into our newly created directory and then run this command, npm run dev, to start the development server. Let me copy this URL and paste it in the browser. And here we get the welcome page, which says it works. That means like everything is working fine.
Nice.
Next thing, what I'm going to do is open this inside my code editor. Let me zoom a little bit.
Yeah,
can you see it?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. That's nice. By the way, we also have this AdonisJS extension for VS Code. So if you use VS Code, you can install it, and then it will do a few things for you. For very first, it like shows you all the routes your application has exposed. Right now, we only have one route, and when you click on it, it opens that, and I thought it also like takes you to the actual place where the route is defined, but it seems like it doesn't do that. So this is how the default project structure looks like. Now, if you're just getting started with AdonisJS for the first time, it might be overwhelming to see all these folders and files. But once you understand the basics, or once you have built something basic with the framework, having this folder structure and everything like pre-configured will save you a lot of time, because you don't have to do it every time. You just know where the things are, and you can get into building mode versus setting things up.
Yeah, at Frappe we
But for
call this convention over configuration over code. So like there is a
yeah,
convention. Okay, you put some file here and it will be that, right? So it's much easier
yeah,
once you get the hang of it.
yeah. Once you're like comfortable, you pretty much like get how to get things done.
Cool.
So now before we start writing any code, I can like give you a quick overview of the important bits. When you create a new application, you have this tsconfig file, which means that we are going to use TypeScript. All the starter kits that comes with AdonisJS, they are configured to use TypeScript. TypeScript is JavaScript with all the type safety, essentially. And next thing is we have this type set to module, which means we are using ES modules. Anyone who is not much aware of the JavaScript and the Node ecosystem, we have got two module system. One is CommonJS, the other one is ESM. CommonJS is not part of the JavaScript specification. It was just created with Node, but ES modules are part of the specification. So we use ES modules. That's like an important thing to know. And then we also configured Wheat. Wheat is, I would say, the de facto way to bundle your front end source code. So it's not used for the backend code. It's used when you want to pull in Java, like front end JavaScript or CSS, and you want to bundle that for the browser. You use Wheat for that, and we like auto configure all that stuff for you.
Cool.
So yeah, that's how like standard project structure looks like. Now,
Quick question.
yeah,
Like your VS Code bar looks nice. So how did you configure it to go horizontal? I haven't explored it, but
yeah, I think I tweaked some setting. It's a new thing. I can try to search it if you can find something. I think it's called activity bar. Yeah, so they have like this setting now called activity
okay,
bar.location, which is on top.
nice. Let me just try it out on the. Yeah, you can continue.
Yeah, sure. So now let's start from the basics of like how you handle HTTP request in AdonisJS. So everything starts with the routing layer or routes. Within this file, which is called routes.ts, inside the start directory, you define all the routes that your application exposes to the outside world. And then on every route, you can define a route handler, which handles the request and returns a response. Out here, we are using a shortcut to define a route for the root or the home page. And then we are saying render this template, which is pages/home. And this template is stored inside this directory called resources views. And then we have pages and home. So this is where that it works thing that you see on the
Messages come.
browser here
Yeah.
comes. Yeah. This is like one way to do it. Another way is you say router.get, and here you define a callback. From this callback, you can return anything. For example, I can say hello world from callback. If I go back, we see hello world from callback. So this is like known as a closure or an inline callback that you can use to handle a request. And finally, and the recommended way is to use controllers, because if you use inline callbacks, after a while your routes file will be really big and it will be like doing a lot of things inline within a single file. So we tell you to like abstract all this inside controllers. So that is what I'm going to do right now. I will create a
Yep.
new controller. And by the
Yeah.
way, you can use these commands using NodeJS, and then there are commands that you can use to do different things. If I press enter right now, you
Can
get
you
this
zoom in a
help
bit?
output.
I think like
Is it better now?
yeah, much better.
Okay, cool. So when I enter this command node ace, we get this help screen where you can like view all the commands. And the one we want to use is the make controller command, which creates a new HTTP controller. So let's do that. And we will name it expenses. And the controller gets created inside this directory called app controllers. Before we open that controller, let's try to use it here. We'll say expenses controller, and the method we want to use is the index method. And right now it gives us the error because we don't have any index method on our controller. So let's go to that file and let's define the index method. It will accept one argument, which is going to be the HTTP context. You can learn more about like what is HTTP context, but to just give you a brief overview, HTTP context is a state which is isolated between requests, and it holds the information about the current HTTP request, be it the request body, the request parameters, the authenticated user, all that stuff. You can get access to it from the HTTP context.
Cool. I've shared a link to
One,
the docs for HTTP context in the chat.
cool. For example, if I pull in request from here, I can say hello world from request URL endpoint. Go back to our routes file. We don't have the error anymore. And if you go to the browser, we say see hello world from slash endpoint, which is like essentially the page that we are on.
Cool.
So that's how like you handle a request. You define a route, you create a controller, you bind the controller method on the route, and from this controller method you can return anything. For example, if I return object, it will be converted to JSON, and here we get JSON back.
Nice.
And finally, we can also render templates from here. So that's exactly what we want to do. We want to use the template engine that comes with AdonisJS. And out here, we have like an autocomplete of all the templates available to us within our application. So let's render the same template we rendered earlier, pages/home. And here it says it works.
Cool.
So yeah, that's essentially how it looks like. If you have any questions.
Yeah, it's like at first glance it looks like okay, typical like model, view, and controller. So model is not yet there, but at least the controller part is there, right?
Yeah,
View and
yeah. So the
controller.
controller and the
View.
and the views are there, but models will like come now.
Yeah, makes sense.
But first, I was thinking to let's create a new page where we are going to show a list of all the expenses we have made, and
Mm-hmm.
also a list of all the categories we have.
Cool.
So let's start doing that. I will call it pages
Hey
expenses
Louis, welcome
list.
back. So Louis says hi bros. The bro approves this stream. Nice.
Cool. And I will create this template. I will say make view. By the way, right now I'm not using the command line. I'm using the VS Code extension to create the template that I want to do. I'll paste it here. And now we have this list. Here we'll say expenses list, and maybe we want to create a header with a dev, another dev, and expense tracker. And here maybe we can have a navigation, UL, LI, For now, we will have a link to log in. Maybe once we log in, we will display the user information and other links to track expenses and all that stuff. I'm just, like scaffolding some basic HTML we can use to build the rest of the app.
Cool. When are we going to add
And
Tailwind?
maybe after this,
Works.
let's have some basic HTML in place. And here we can say we have all the categories, then we have another dev. Out here we can say we have here all the expenses. Okay, so we have like the basic HTML in place. Let's add Tailwind now. So I'm going to use the, let's go back, the wheat setup, because we are using wheat, and we'll essentially use wheat to compile Tailwind. That's the setup I'm going to use.
Cool.
Let's, not this part. Okay, this. So we're using Tailwind, then they use post CSS to build Tailwind, and then there is auto prefixer to prefix some CSS classes. These three dependencies is what we need. Then let's initiate the Tailwind project. It's going to create these two files. And finally, we have to tell Tailwind that all of our, we are going to use all the Tailwind classes inside these files. So resources, views, all that edge. So it's like going to track all the edge templates and see which classes we are using. And
like, is Edge kind of what I used last was mustache or something?
Oh yeah, I think I should have explained that. So let's follow the documentation and talk more about it.
So in terms of docs, when it's funny story, how I came to know about Adonis for the first time. So me and Faris, right, he's a principal product engineer at Frappe. We were discussing documentation, right? So we wanted to revamp Frappe frameworks documentation. And what he said was like, I really like this documentation of this Node.js framework called Adonis. And I said, okay, let's see. And that's the first time I heard about it. And when I said Faris like 2 days ago that Harminder is coming on the show, he was like, wow, I really admire him. And yeah, he said hi. Probably
Yeah,
he's
cool.
also
Hi.
watching the stream.
Nice. So yeah, we were talking about the template engine. So essentially, you can use any template engine you want, but we have been maintaining one for like last 6 years called Edge. And if you go to the Adonis docs views and template, there you will find a link to Edge. And Edge is, as we say, it's like a really simple, it's modern, and a batteries included template engine. And this is how essentially it looks like. So if you have a variable, you want to evaluate it, you put it inside mustache braces, as you said, and it will output that. Then you can like use any JavaScript expression. So out here I'm using a JavaScript expression where I want to show a plan of a subscription. Otherwise, I want to show the text not subscribed. Then you can also use async await within the templates. Then you can write conditionals. We have partials. And finally, we also have components. So this is all like you can create and you can use components. And we will like try to create a couple of them and use in this stream as well.
Awesome. The
Yeah.
documentation looks beautiful, by the way.
Thanks. So yeah, you can like go to the Edge documentation. You can learn more about Edge, how it works. And if you don't like Edge, you can like pull in any template engine you like. But of course, you have to like set it up manually if you do that. So right now we are configuring Tailwind, and we are telling Tailwind to like look at all the Edge files and see which classes we are using.
Cool.
Okay, so that's done. And finally, we have to like drop these three directives into our CSS file. And by default, we have this app.css file where I'm going to drop all these directives. And let's give it a try by using some classes on a on a tag. So maybe out here we can do that. Let's go back. It's not working right now. Maybe we have to restart the server so that Wheat can pick up Tailwind. One more thing. We have to include our JavaScript bundle that Wheat has created. And for that, I'm going to use this @Wheat directive. Again, you can like learn more about it, how all this works within the documentation. Right now, if I will explain, it will take too much. But essentially, what we are doing is we are using this @Wheat tag, and we are including this JavaScript bundle, which essentially also includes our CSS file.
Makes sense.
Okay, now we have Tailwind working. Cool. So let's see if we can add some styles to it. There are two ways we can go about it. Either we can try to build something manually. Yeah, let's do that. Let's try to drop some classes here and there and see how it goes. BG Gray 100. Let's say padding or H16, border bottom, border B. Gray 300. Then we'll say container MX auto. And then let's make it a flex with justify between. Is it picking up the changes or not? Okay, I don't think it's picking up the changes. Maybe it has to do with our config. Oh, it's resources and not resource.
Ah.
Okay, it looks good now. And it's a flex, let's say items center. And let's put this height on our flex. Okay, so we have like a really simple header, which will, I think, which will do it for now. Then we have our main section. Let's wrap it inside a container as well. Container MX auto. And let's also make this flex. And let's give this a width of 64.
Cool. Izaz Khan says, nice to see Adonis V6 getting out. I'm getting used to it. My background is in Rails where I use Turbo all the time. I would also like to use it in Adonis since the structure is almost the same.
Yeah, so I think we initially talked about it. Turbo or HTMX or Unpoly, they all are like pretty much the same. And you can use Turbo inside an AdonisJS application like the way you use it inside any other app. But for now, at least in this stream, I'm focusing on Unpoly. Maybe later we can do one with Turbo as well. But for now, I will like stick to Unpoly because I've been using it and kind of used to it. All right, let's give it a height of full and a border right. And let's give this div a bit of padding from the left. Okay, cool. I think that's all we can do for the styling. We're not like going to make it look the most prettiest web app
That's fine.
in the world.
At least
but
like
yeah, at least
let's add a top padding or something. Like
oh yeah.
it's really I don't know what I have with negative spaces, but yeah, much better.
Yeah, cool. Yeah,
Thanks.
I think it looks better now. So what we need now is a list of categories and a list of expenses, and we are essentially like going to create them using the app. And in order to create that, we want a user to be logged in. So I will like start the application flow from the login screen. We will skip sign up for now. Otherwise, we will be like spending a lot of time in sign up and then log in. We will create a user manually and then we will log in that user. So uh, before we do that, we will be dealing with databases because we like have to store expenses, categories, and users inside a database. And we will be using SQLite for now. And we will be interacting with SQLite using an ORM called Lucid. Lucid comes pre-configured with like every AdonisJS application. It's maintained by the core team. And again, like as rest of the things, you are not forced to use Lucid. You can use any other ORM you want, but if you decide to use Lucid, it like comes pre-configured.
Makes sense.
And again, we have like documentation for Lucid as well.
So I see this pattern, right? Like instead of relying on something like pre-existing like Prisma or something, you have also built like Edge and Lucid around Adonis. Is there um, like what was your
Yeah,
reasoning behind going this route?
yeah. It's like a very opinionated reasoning. I can talk a bit more about it. So a lot of these tools exist even before like the other popular alternative were created. So Lucid was created in 2016, and if I'm not wrong, there was no Prisma at that time. In fact, there was no type ORM as well. SQLize used to be the popular option. When Edge was created, the front end frameworks were not same as they are right now. For example, Vue was pretty much like you drop in Vue inside an existing app and then you make some parts of your application interactive. There was like handlebars. Handlebars is like really bare bones. There was Pug, um, and Pug is not like maintained anymore. So that's the reason like we have Edge, which also like highlights another theme that all the popular tools that we see right now, they are changing every couple of years in the JavaScript ecosystem. So this is like one of the things we have. It's that the ecosystem is not like
Yeah,
as stable as
very, very
Python
rapidly.
or PHP. Yeah, and we don't want people who are coming in and recommending them, okay, like this year you should be using type ORM, and then we are like building all of our integrations with type ORM, and then after 2 years, okay, like Prisma is cool now, so we are like switching our integrations and moving them to Prisma, or maintaining like multiple integrations for multiple like ORMs. So we created Lucid even before they all existed, and we are like still maintaining it.
Nice.
Lucid might also have like some of it downside in comparison to other tools, as like every tool has some downsides, but at least this is something which is maintained for many years, and if you're sticking to it, you can be sure that we will like continue to maintain it, and you can continue to using it.
Awesome.
So
Yeah.
that's the reason we have like all these different modules, and that's the reason we are maintaining it. You will also see one more in this stream, and we'll talk about that.
Nice.
Yeah.
Cool.
So let me give you a quick overview of like what Lucid is. So Lucid is like a combination of multiple things. First, it's a fluent query builder, which is built on top of Nix, and Nix is also like really old. And by old, I mean in the in good sense. And we haven't created it; it's created by someone else, and they support like all these databases. So if you're using Nix, you can write your queries in JavaScript, and then you can like switch the underlying drivers, and your query will be compiled depending upon the driver you are using. And this is how writing a query in Nix looks like. So let's look at some simple example. Yeah. So here you're saying next user, I want to select ID, age, and then I basically get all the users with their ID and age from the users table. Then on top of next, we have our migration system, where you define your database tables, or you define the changes of your database schema inside code. And then you can run those migrations to actually reflect the changes in the databases. And these migrations are tracked. So one migration does not run multiple times. It only runs for one time. And if you run it again, it will be kind of a no op, like no changes will be made. Then we have this ORM layer, which is using data models, and models are defined as classes. We will learn more about them. Then we have model factories and database seeders. Factories are something that you will use when you're writing tests to generate a lot of fake data. And seeders are something you will use when you want to get your database, uh, when you like basically want to fill the database with some initial data. For example, you are building an app and you want to display a list of countries inside that app, and you want all those countries within the database. So what you can do is you can create a database seeder, and anytime you deploy your application for the first time, you can run that seeder to populate the database with the list of countries.
Makes sense. Kind of like
Yeah.
fixtures. So in Frappe framework,
Yeah.
we call them fixtures. So that, okay, there's fixed records. Whenever someone installs this app, you just create these records in the database. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's essentially what Lucid is. Then there is like the installation guide, but it comes pre-configured, so we don't have to configure it.
Cool.
And we can actually start using it. So let's start from the migration. We store migrations inside this directory called database/migrations, and here you have like multiple files. We get one file out of the box for the users table, which is needed for authentication. And here we have defined like some really common fields. If you want more fields, you can add them here as. So what I'm going to do is, okay, we already have this directory. So I'm basically using SQLite database, which is stored inside this temp directory. And now I will run this migration using this command called migration run. And after the migration is completed, I can see the success message. If I try to run it again, it tells me like the database is already up to date. There is nothing else to change inside the database. So that's essentially how the migration system works. We will be creating a few more migrations for other tables, like to store categories and expenses. But before that, let's look at models as well. So the goal of migrations is to change your database schema, and then you use the models to interact with the table. And so basically, if you want to fetch all the users, you want to create a new user, you want to delete a user, you will be using models for that.
Cool.
And this is how a model looks like. It is a class which extends the base model. Just ignore this compose for now. I will talk about it, what exactly it is. And then you define all the columns that you have inside your database on your model as well. Now, these columns do not change the state of your database table. For example, if I add a new column here, username, it's not going to change the database for me. But the reason we have to define it, otherwise TypeScript will give you an error. So if I say const user, new user, and I, let's say, try to define a property called username, TypeScript won't let us do that because it's not a known property on this class. So you have to tell TypeScript, okay, like these are the properties I will be dealing with. Otherwise, the compiler will give you an error. So you have to
So where
define
do
them
you
on.
actually define this then? Like the actual columns?
It's inside the migration.
Okay. So do we have to create this migration file, or like it is auto generated by something?
No, you have to create it manually. So
Okay.
let's say if I create one, I say notice make migration, and let's say we create one for categories first. So this is the file which will get created, and here you define how your table will look like. So let's say we will say we are going to have a category name, which should not be, and then let's say we want to have a budget, which is going to be an integer. It should not be nullable. And I think that's pretty much all we need for a category. So yeah, this is where like you define all the columns, and then we have like timestamps for the created at and updated at.
Cool. So Hacker Rahul asks, is Lucid framework agnostic like Edge?
So Lucid is framework agnostic, but there are a few things. First, we don't have any documentation for the framework agnostic usage right now. Second, all these commands that you are seeing, like make migration or migration run, these commands come from the command line tool called ACE. So you will have to like install ACE in order to run these commands. Now, once we will be like documenting how you can use it with any other framework, we will like also talk about how you can run these commands without using ACE. We haven't thought much about it, but essentially we will be writing the docs and we will like tell you how you can run these commands without using ACE as well.
Cool.
That's like the current state of Lucid is right now.
One more question if you want to take. George
Yeah,
Roberto
sure.
asks, is the Adonis prepared for serverless environment?
I would say no. And it's not like technically you cannot use it. I don't think any full stack or batteries included framework is a good fit for serverless, because serverless is like all about having very so essentially your every single serverless function is atomic. You do one thing over there and you want the cold boots to be really fast. And anytime you pull in any batteries included framework, they are essentially doing so many things, and they will like boot slowly in comparison to like writing a raw function in Node.js. So like if you ask me, I won't say it's a good fit for that. Maybe you want to start with a micro framework and use that, or maybe like use a serverless first framework who thinks in that paradigm and make decisions for that runtime. Okay, so yeah, let's go back to our model. This is how you define all the columns. Next, we are using a mixin as well. I'm not sure how like quickly I can explain the concepts of mixin, but I will try my best. So mixins is a way in JavaScript you can add additional behavior on a class. And right now we are using this auth finder mixin, which comes from the auth package. And by using this mixin, we are adding additional behavior to the user class, which allows us to verify the credentials of a user during authentication. And we will see how we do that. But essentially, what this auth finder mixin is doing, it's saying this class is going to have one more method called verify credentials to verify the credentials of a user. And again, you can go to the docs, you can learn more about it. And let me show you one more cool thing. That's our REPL. So REPL is this like command line interface you can use to interact with your application. So right now I'm skipping the sign up process. So I'm going to use the REPL and use the user model to create a user inside the database. So if I say ls, it will like show you all the helpers you have inside the REPL. Let's say I want to use this one, load models. One second. Let me resize the window. Okay. And now it tells me like all the models have been loaded and you can use the models variable to access them. So if I say models.user, it will give me my user model. And here I can use the method called create. And you're not mute, by the way. Okay. Okay. Cool. Okay. So here I'm like using this create method from the model, and I'm saying create a new user with this email, with this password, and with this full name. Once that's done, what
I'll
we
be back
get
in two
back
minutes. Someone
is
is
a
at the
is
door. I have
a
to take the door.
is
You can continue, by the way.
so it's a user model instance which has the properties. So we basically have our email, and our password has been hashed inside the database. And this hashing is done using so essentially earlier I said it's adding the verify credentials method, but it's also doing one more thing. It's also hashing the passwords every time we create a new user or if you modify the password for a user. So we have this password hash, we have a user full name, then we have like some timestamps and all that stuff. Uh, Now, what I'm going to do is I will like exit out of the REPL now. And we already have a user that we can use to log in into our system. And before we do that, let me also open this database inside this GUI. So let's create a new SQLite connection. We'll call it expense tracker and give it the file path. CD temp. Let's copy this. db.sqlite3. Okay, so here is our user stable, and we have the user that we just created with all the columns.
Cool.
Okay, so now let's do the login bit. Let's define a route for that. So we'll say route.on login. We want to render a template called pages/login. Let's create this page. And let's say it's a login page. Let's keep this one really simple. Main, then we'll have a dev with a class width of 2xl, and then mx auto. Inside this, let's have a form. And the action is going to be on the login route. It's going to post there. Label for email, then we need an input. ID to be email, and the name to be email as well. Let's copy this, change this to password, and all these three to password as well. Another div with a button of submit that says login. So let's go to our list page and update this link to login. And here we have our login page. It's not styled.
That's
Yeah. I think it's fine for the login page. We'll like just skip the styling for now. And now if I try to submit this page, we get a error which says cannot post login 404, which means we don't have a route that can handle post request on /login. So let's define that. It's going to be post on /login. And we'll use a controller name called session controller with a method called store.
Cool, makes sense. So this on and post, right? Like on is basically get, I'm assuming, or is it?
Yeah. So I can explain. So we have like these methods like get, post, put, delete. So these are like for different HTTP verbs. On is a shorthand when you want to define a get route and you want to render a template without defining any any route
Controller.
without any defining any explicit route handler or controller.
Okay.
Uh, so this is like a shorthand to render templates.
Makes sense.
Let's create this controller, make controller session. Okay, let's import it and define the store method on it. And here we get the request. Let's return all the request body that we get just to see how it looks like. Now, if I go to, let's go back, and if I submit, you will notice one thing happened, that the page got refreshed and nothing like really happens. Essentially, we are like being redirected back to the same page, and there's error which you can't see right now. You don't have to like do anything special to debug this. Anytime you're building a server rendered application and you have forms, you just have to uh, grab all the errors you have and display them like globally in some part of your application. And that is what I'm going to do right now. So I'll say message in, or basically I will use this tag. I think it's errors bag. And here I will say @each message in messages. And let's display that to see what exactly the error message we have.
Yeah, this is kind of like Flask. So Flask has
Okay,
this flash messages thing.
cool. It's errors bag. Yep, I think so. Or if I say flash messages. Yeah, so that's errors bag. It's weird why I don't get it. Errors bag. Oh yeah, sorry. The variable name is kind of messed up. Okay, yeah. So let's get rid of this inspect call. And here we get an error which says like invalid or expired CSRF token. I can talk a bit more about like what exactly is happening. There are like few things happening. Very first, anytime you are building a traditional server rendered application where you have like full page reloads, you submit a form, the form goes to the server, there is something wrong with the form, and now the user, you basically like want to give that feedback to the user. So you redirect the user back to the form, and once the user come back, you need some way to tell them what exactly went wrong. And HTTP is stateless, so what you do is you use sessions or cookies to basically communicate between pages and between redirects. And flash messages is one time only data inside a session store. This concept is not like specific to Adonis. It's used by like a lot of frameworks. If you go to Django, Rails, or Laravel, they all use it. You can learn more about the concept, basically. And essentially, that's what we are using to tell the user that when they submit the form, the CSRF token is either invalid or expired. And CSRF token is basically a way to prevent CSRF attacks. And we get this error because we are not sending a CSRF token when we are submitting the form. And that's what I'm going to fix now by using this function called CSRF field. Now we will have this CSRF token inside our form. So if I do a refresh and show you the HTML, here we have a hidden input with the CSRF token inside it. And now if we submit the form, it gets submitted. We get JSON back because from our session controller, we are like returning all the request body, which is an object, which gets converted to JSON. And here we have our CSRF input. The email is null. The password is null. Does all that make sense?
Yep, makes sense. So we get the data we had, and now next step will be to actually log in.
Yeah, essentially. So what I can do is I can pull in email and password from request.all, and we want to log in the user now. So I will import the user model. And you remember I was talking about this method that you can use to verify the user credentials. It will take the email and then it will take the password and it will give us back the user. And here we can return the user back. So if I go to the documentation and tell you a bit more about this verify credentials method, this is essentially doing a few things. Uh, can you mute? Okay, because I'm like getting some background noise that might. Okay, so uh, if we talk about this verify credentials method, uh, yeah, so here we have. So this is like the standard approach that you can take, where you first find a user with their email address. If you don't find the user, you tell them, okay, they have invalid credentials, and then you try to verify their password, whether it's correct or not, using the hash module. But if you do it manually, you're basically exposing your application to a thing called timing attack, where an attacker can look at the time it takes for your login page to process in order to tell whether the email is invalid or whether the password is invalid. If the email is invalid, your application will respond quickly. And if the password is invalid, it will take more time because usually hashing algorithms are slow and they take time to verify if two passwords are same or not. So they can use this timing information to know if you have a user with a specific email or not. And this can be abused in like many different ways. First, once they know the email is valid, maybe they can try different password combinations. Or if you have a website which is like kind of very sensitive, for example, like a dating website, and I can try someone's email to find out if they are on that website or not, just to know if they are, like using that dating website or any other website, and use that information in uh, different ways. So ideally, it's a good idea that you should not handle the user credential verification yourself and use this mixin that we give you, which essentially
Makes
exposes
sense.
this method called verify credentials, and it prevents your application from timing attacks. So
Cool.
that's like the reason behind using this mixin.
So I heard for timing attack like very for the very first time. I haven't heard it, but yeah, it was nice to know that. Now it makes
Oh yeah,
sense. Mm-hmm.
yeah. You can like just learn like search about the term, and you will find out like how exactly it works.
Cool.
So here, if I enter the email that I used to create the user and then enter the password, here I get back the user information. That is what we are returning from our controller, but we want to log in the user. So we will use this auth object and we'll call this method auth.use login and give it the user. Again, documentation explains like what exactly is happening here in depth, but to give you a quick idea, we are using the auth object. Then we have this concept of guards. Guards are like different implementations of authentication. So when you log in with sessions, that's one guard. If you're doing login with tokens, that's going to be a different guard, and you can configure all these guards inside your config file. So if I go here, I have a guard named web, which is using this sessions implementation. Similarly, if you want to use tokens, you can define a new guard for that, and you can like pull in the tokens implementation and use that. So here I'm saying I want to use the web guard and I want to log in this particular user. And once the login is done, like their session is created, we can redirect them to, like let's say the home page. So we say response.redirect to /, which means the home page. Now let's give it a try. This, and here we come to the home page. Right now we see login here because we are not like handling the case where we pull in the user information and display that. So let's do that as next thing. We have to do a few things. First, we have to protect this endpoint from public access, because right now, if I copy this, open a new incognito tab, I can open it. Ideally, this should only be for the logged in users. And for that, we will use our auth middleware. And this auth middleware is defined in this file, and it comes from this file. Again, you can go through the source code and documentation to learn more about it. For now, I'll like quickly jump and like continue with the application.
Cool.
But now if I open it in the incognito tab, you can see I'm redirected back to the login page with a message which says unauthorized access. But if I refresh here, I can still access it because we just log in. And next we are going to this page, and out here we will write a conditional if auth.user. We will say,
so auth is globally available in every template?
yeah, so it's globally available within templates after you are authenticated. Auth.user full name, else we want to display this. So here you can see my name. Let's create a couple of links as well. Let's have one for creating a new category. And have one for creating a new expense. So expenses, let's make it plural as well. And let's make this a flex with some spacing between the links. And maybe give them some underline. Okay, yeah.
So probably you have to wrap the A tag in a separate li. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Cool. So this is how it looks like. Now we can create our maybe like we can start with by creating a category. So this stuff is like something that we have already done. So I'll like quickly go through it. We first have to create an endpoint, expenses/create, and this will display a form. This time I will like just go with the controller, and the create method. Another one. Sorry, it has to be for categories first. And this has to be categories controller. This should be the create method. This one should be the store method. And let's create these two controllers. Nowadays, make controller. This one. Let's import it and define async create and async store. If we go back to our routes file, we don't have any errors. And quickly, let me show you one more thing. If I list all the routes of the application using this command called list routes, we have these two routes. Essentially, what we are doing is we have this resource called categories, and then we are performing different actions on it, which are like called the CRUD actions on a resource. And if you're building your application around resources and you're doing CRUD operations, you can actually define all the routes using this shorthand called resources. So what I can do is I can say I want to define a categories resources, which will be handled by the categories controller. Get rid of these two routes now. do it one more time. Now we have this route, and then we also have a few more, like to view a category, to edit it, to delete it, and all that stuff. So you can like basically use resources for that.
Cool. This is resources as in the REST API, right? So.
No, so a resource is like entity in your application. It uh, like it follows the convention of REST, but don't like confuse REST with JSON. If someone is doing that, you can have like RESTful endpoints even in a traditional application like a server rendered one.
Cool. In this case, the resource is actually an entity, right? Or a
Yeah,
model
yeah,
in our case, to be specific.
yeah, yeah.
Makes sense.
Okay, so let's render a template, pages, categories, create. Let's create it. Now we are like repeating a lot of HTML again and again. So maybe we can like create a component which has like all this uh, shared markup inside it, and we use it in different pages. So that is what I'm going to do. Uh, let's say I want to make a view inside components, and I'll name it layouts slash main.edge. Let's remove all this. So this is how our main layout component looks like. All this is like shared stuff. And out here, we want to render anything that comes from the child template, which is using this layout. And we can do that by rendering the main slots. So components have slots, and slots can have name by default. A slot is named as main, and we are like rendering it over here. Again, you can find more about it inside the documentation. And let's go to our categories and use this layout. I'll copy paste everything inside the layout. So all the stuff that you see here, this is like the main slot. And if I want like multiple slots, I can say at the rate slot header and now this will be like the header slot, and all this will be the main slot, if that makes sense.
Yep, kind of like slots in Vue.js or something.
Yeah, it's kind of inspired by that only. Here we have to again get our form, and this time we will post to categories, and we have to like again do some boring stuff of copy pasting a lot of markup from here.
We are yet to create the model, by the way, the categories model.
Yeah. We still have to create that. Uh, but let's finish this first. The category name type will be text. There should be name. There should be name. Like we can also extract all this to a component. Let's do that. Components slash input dot edge, and I will say name, title. These are like the component props. And there we will say the type. If no type is given, we will say text. Now we are using some shortcuts, like essentially you might be like validating the props, and you should be like accepting all the props and merging few over here. But for now, we'll like just keep things simple. And we can use this input. Here we say type. Let's skip the type. Name is name. Let's create another one for the budget. Now we have like these two inputs and our CSRF column.
Yeah, much
And
cleaner.
yeah, it is. And by the way, like when you click on it, it takes you like to the actual component.
Cool. I think this magic is done by the extension.
Yeah. This is by the extension. Uh, so we got our categories table. We have to like create a category model, as you said. So let's do that. And here, let me declare name, which is a string, and then we have our budget, which is an integer. It's a number. There's no thing called an integer in TypeScript, and it should be budget. Okay, so we have this model, we have our controller, we have our template. Now let's wire everything together. So out here, we will say we want to get in our request so that we can read the form data. And let's return it one more time just to make sure everything is good. Oh, wow. Here it is. We have to give a title as well. So title should be name. And the title should be budget. Okay, we don't see any inputs here because it's because like Tailwind is like resetting all the defaults of the input. So let's like drop some classes so it makes sense. Border gray 300 px2 by1. That looks better. Let's give it a class of block, and let's add some margin between the inputs. Okay, this is better now. Let's give it pg gray 900 and then text gray 100 by1 px2. Okay, now we have a nice button as well. Cool. So once again, let's say the category is what? Food or maybe builds. And we have a budget of 10,000. This is like we are getting our data back inside our controller. Let's change this from login to create category. Now, essentially, we should not be like storing this data into the database as it is. We should be validating it to make sure it's provided, it's in the right, like the database, the data types are right as well. And if I go back to the documentation, and we have validation here. So this page highlights like we do the validation at the controller level. And the idea is a user submits a form or you get the data inside a request. You validate it right away. If there are any errors, you send the errors back to the user so that they can like fix the form and they can resubmit it. And once you have the validated data with you, you can use that trusted input to do like rest of the operations, be it inserting inside the database, maybe sending emails, like whatever you want to do. Then you do those actions on the trusted input. And we don't like validate it at the model layer. We do it within the controller as soon as we get it.
Makes sense.
And now again, you can pull in any validation libraries you want, but if you want, we built one called Wine.js. You can use
good.
that again.
Yeah, so like I was going through your LinkedIn today, and like your last post was about this, that I published this library today, and that I think that was your last post on LinkedIn. You have been inactive since then. But yeah, that's where I heard of Wine.js.
Yeah, I don't like spend too much time on LinkedIn. So
Twitter is your main thing, I guess.
Yeah. So again, why we built Wine? We did not start with Wine. We had a validation engine since the inception of the framework, which is like 2015. And again, so many validation engines came and like become hot, and now the hotness like keeps on changing. So when we started, Joey used to be a framework, like a validation layer. I'm not sure how many of you have heard about it. So if I say Joey validation library, like this thing used to be like the really cool validation library. Then it become Yup. Then we got Zod, and in between got something called class validator. And we had like the validation engine since day one. We just abstracted it into a framework agnostic library called Wine.js. And by the way, Wine.js is like a lot faster than Zod, and it's like really faster than Yup as well. And there are like technical reasons behind it that you can read within the documentation. But the idea is, again, we don't want the pieces of the framework to change as the hotness in the JavaScript ecosystem changes. We want to like commit to these things because these are like fundamental pieces of building an app. And that's the reason we have Wine. Now, Wine again comes pre-configured, and you can start using it right away. And Wine uses like this concept of validators, and you create one validator for one entity inside your app.
Cool.
And so let me like create one, make validator, name it category. This is where the file goes. So let's open it. And from here, I will export constant create category validator. Wine.compile and wine.object. Now here we will define the fields we need. So we need the name, which should be a string, and it should have a minimum length of 4. Then we need the budget, which should be a number. It should be positive.
Cool.
So this is us essentially defining the schema, and then we can use this schema against any piece of data to validate it, and then we get the validated output. And Wine is fast than Zod and Yup because we pre-compile Wine schemas into reusable JavaScript functions. But Zod does not does any pre-compiling. That's the reason Wine is faster than them.
Makes sense.
So here we will say await request dot validate using. So what we are saying is validate the request data using a validator that we will provide here. So we'll say create category validator, and what we get back is the name and the budget. And here we have like the static type information as well. So it tells us that we have a name property, which is a string. Then we have a budget property, which is a number. So you have like type safety as well.
Cool. I'm assuming this validate using calls validation on the body, right? Like
Yeah,
the
yeah,
dot
yeah.
all. Yeah.
Yes, it performs validation on the body. There is like a long form to it as well. It's in the documentation. Yeah. So this is like the long form where you say
Okay.
request.all, you say validator.validate that data, but validate using is like, uh, like a short form. And then if you want to also like validate cookies, you can do that, headers, params, and all that stuff.
Cool.
Here we will say I want to create a category. Let's give it a name, give it a budget, and redirect the user back to the home page. That sounds good to me. Let's give it a try. Now, if we submit the form without any information, we get redirected back. And again, we get the errors back inside Flash messages that we can access and display next to our fields. Now, luckily that we have created the component, we can just do it in one place and it will just work for us. So input error, the name, $messages. Let's give it a try. Okay. So it says the name
Nice.
field must be defined, the budget field must be defined, and we are like using this tag which pulls in the input error from the flash messages, and it takes the field name, and then it gives you like this variable called messages, which is an array of errors. I know that it's always going to be one error for now, given how our validator is constructed. So I'm not like doing a loop. I'm just printing the array directly.
Cool. This was very straightforward. I didn't expect this to be very easy, like displaying the error messages. I think Wine is doing some magic here of giving those messages, right?
Yeah, yeah, it is. It is doing that.
This was cool.
So let's say we want to add a new category called bills. The budget is 10K. We say create a category. We get an error. It says we don't have any table because we did not run the migration. So let's do that. Okay, let's resubmit the form. Okay, we come to this page. We don't see the categories because we are not pulling them in and displaying them. So we are going to our expenses controller because this like home page is rendered by this expenses controller. And here we will like pass an array of categories.
Cool. The context for the page to render. In other
Yeah,
words,
it's we call it like the state of the page,
okay.
just to be in sync with the documentation. And here
Nice.
we will say category dot all. We'll like pull in all the categories. We'll pass it here. Now let's go to this page.
Cool. While you're doing that, like just a quick question around documentation. So
Yeah.
how do you go about documentation in general? Like any particular techniques that you have come across that make sense, or like that make it easier to maintain? And specifically, my question is about keeping it up to date, because I have found it very hard to keep documentation up to date. Like once you write it, becomes even harder when multiple contributors are sending pull requests. So how you go about it at Adonis?
Yeah. Yeah. So there are a few things. Like first, it's the approach, like what to document. I document the technical bits and not like the tutorials. Tutorials needs to exist, but they should not be like part of the documentation. Some people like put them within the documentation if the scope of your docs is really simple. So let's say if you have something really simple, maybe you can have one category for the tutorial and then you have like the technical explanation. AdonisJS is really big, so we just keep it like technical, something that people can reference as they are using the framework. Even I can reference it. It's not like a tutorial that I read for one time and I don't need it again. Second, how do we keep it up to date? I think it's more of a discipline. We have also like fallen off the track many times where someone sends a PR, we merge it, and we just like forget that we also have to document it. And then people were like, hey, I cannot do this. And we said, no, this has already been like added to the framework. Oh, it looks like we missed the documentation. And then we go ahead and start documenting it. But I've been like doing it for a very long time. Now it's really simple. If something gets added, it needs to be inside the docs as well. I think
Cool.
today itself, if I go to github.com/AdonisJS Lucid, and there is this PR which is like in a mergeable state, but it won't get merged until we like have a new doc inside the testing group covering the usage of these database test utilities. So now we need to have the docs first before we merge the PR. Obviously, if you're like just getting started, it's easily to miss them. But if you maintain multiple projects for a longer time, it kind of works. You just remember.
Yeah, from this comes that even if you are able to say get the docs, how do you maintain the consistency, right? Because I will tell you like my experience with Frappe framework documentation. So whoever creates the PR, right, they also try to add the documentation as well. But over time, the framework documentation has become kind of not consistent. So you can say, okay, this part was written by someone else, this by someone else, this by someone else. Even the screenshots and everything is like very different. So how do you go about that?
Yeah. See, again, I don't have like much exposure from different communities, but like there are two communities I've followed very closely. One is Laravel, and the other one is Vue. And I know in both the cases, in Laravel, like the creator Taylor, he writes most of the documentation and he reviews or like edits on the documentation if it comes in form of a PR. And I think the same thing is done by the Vue team as well. There are like a set of people who maintains docs and they like edit every doc that makes it way onto the website to make sure that the tone is consistent and the way information is displayed is consistent. And many times you just have to like uh, s- so let's say there's another example. It's inside the session one, right? Someone sent a PR for the docs. Oh no, it's not here, it's inside docs, v6 docs, where they like they like wanted to add this information uh, about the environment variables validation related to session, and they like took the shortcut of saying, hey, don't forget to edit this file. Now this is not consistent with the tone I use, but it was a good reminder for me, okay, this thing needs to be fixed. So I actually just did the commit myself and wrote like a complete section on it, okay, why you have to do it, and close the PR. Now some might find it like rude that someone is trying to contribute but you are closing their PR and you are doing the thing yourself, but I think I'm doing justice to the reader who is coming onto the website and they want to get the information and they're not like juggling between different tones, and somewhere the information is displayed properly and in other places this information is not displayed properly. So I'm at least like doing justice to them if I'm closing this PR. So like that's the approach I take, and you have to like settle on something similar. Maybe there are like other bigger communities like React, they may have like a better approach to it
No,
that
makes
I don't
sense.
know.
Like, in short, someone has to own this. Like, okay, there is someone responsible. Okay, whatever comes, you make it consistent with whatever we are following. Makes sense.
Yeah,
Cool.
and if you are big enough, maybe it can be a group of people too. Like with an honest, just like
Makes
we are
sense.
not as big as Vue or React, so
Yeah.
one
By
person
the
can take
end,
care of it.
I would like you to look at Frappe framework website. Yeah.
Yeah, sure, that'll be awesome.
Cool. Cool.
All right,
Yeah. We were creating categories
we
or displaying them.
was.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, we were. So here, let's say we have a div again, div a UL, and it will like loop over categories. So we'll say category in categories, and this categories, by the way, comes from the controller. So this is where we are passing them, and each category is an instance of this category model. So it's not a plain JavaScript object. And here we can say category dot name, and let's say dash category dot budget. Where are we? Here. Okay, so we see bills, and then we see like this number out here. Let's add some space so you like it. Okay, that so we have bills, and then we like have a number next to it. Uh, Now, instead of like adding multiple categories or editing them or deleting them, I think I'll quickly jump on to expenses so that we can also, like explore how relationships works in Lucid, because an expense always belongs to a category.
Makes sense.
So let's repeat the drill, make model expense. And this time I will use this flag dash M, which will create the model and migration together. So let's go to our expenses table. Here we need table, and it's going to be an integer, which is going to be the category ID. It should be not nullable, unsigned, and it references ID and table categories. And on delete, we should cascade it. So basically, we're setting up a foreign key. We are saying that we have a foreign key on the categories.id. And anytime a category get deleted, we want to delete all the expenses related to it. Otherwise, these will be like orphan expenses. We don't know how to display.
Makes sense.
Then we have title, which should not be nullable, and then an integer, the amount we actually spent on that expense. And then we want to have a date. That's going to be the transaction date, like when we made the expense. So yeah, these are the only fields we need. A foreign key, some information about the expense. Now let's go to our model. Here we'll say category ID, which is a number. It's going to be a column. Copy paste 3 times. This is title. This is amount, and this is the transaction date. And its type is going to be date time, and this will be date. So there's one more thing. If you will notice that even though the columns inside the database are in snake case, we are able to define the properties inside camel case, and we do this by using a thing called naming strategy on models. And the default naming strategy like uses the same defaults depending upon the environment. Usually, databases have been conventionally using snake case, so that's why we convert the column names to snake case when we are making queries. And people in the JavaScript world define all the variables and properties in camel case. So we use that here.
Makes sense.
All right, that's done. Now we need a relationship. So if we go to our category model, what we want to say is category has many expenses, uh, basically. So here we say declare expenses. It's going to be of type has many, and the model. Here we say has many expense. This needs to be a type import. So by using this decorator, we are able to define a property called expenses, which is of type has many, and it has many that expense model. So this is how like you define a relationship. You can also define the inverse if you need it. You don't have to do it always. For example, an expense belongs to a category. So if you want, you can also define that within the expense model. We don't need it, but we can still do that. So declare category belongs to type of category, and the decorator, let's make it a type import. So that's how like we essentially set up our relationships.
One to many. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
Now what we need next is a few endpoints. So let's repeat this process. Expenses. We'll go to expenses controller. So we are defining a resource and using the expenses controller, which is here. And let's copy paste some stuff from here. These two methods. Expenses. And let's comment this out for now. So we have to create this view where we can like show a form to create an expense. Oh, what just happened? And let's copy paste everything from here, paste it here. This will go to /expenses. We are going to have a title this time. Then we will have the amount. Transaction amount, and we need another input for the transaction date. We'll say transaction date, and it should have a type of date. Yeah, and here we say create expense. Let's give it a try.
Looks
Okay.
good.
Yeah, but I think we are missing our auth middleware, so that's the reason
Oh,
we
okay.
see login on the top. And so what essentially happens is a resource define multiple routes. So when you're using a middleware, you have to tell, okay, on which route of the resource you want to apply the middleware. I want to apply it on all the routes. But if you want to apply it on specific routes, then you can like tell, okay, I want to apply it on just store and delete and not index.
Makes sense.
Okay, so we see our header back. Now we have this, and we have a nice date picker coming directly from the browser. And now we can say, oh, we also have to display a drop down, like in which category we are creating the expense. We don't have a component for select. Maybe we can create one. Components, select. And let's copy this, paste it here, replace this with select. Name will be name prop, ID will be the ID prop, and the options are going to be an array. So option in options. Let's define one option dot value and option dot name. And
It should be ID, right? The value will be.
yeah, it should be ID.
Cool.
And here we can come. We say we want to use our select. We'll name it to what category ID. And here we want to pass in the options, which should be an array of categories. That means when we are rendering this page, we need to pass categories to this template. So we come here. Again, let's copy this, paste it here, and pass our categories. I think we should be all good. Here we get our build. Of course, we need to give it a title. Okay, so we get our select box there. Okay, I think it's fine for now. Now, let's give it some title. Broadband bill. The amount was like what, 1,200. We paid it today. This is the category, and we want to create an expense. We see an empty page because we are not doing anything when we submit when we take a form. So again, we are going to create a new validator so that we can validate the data
Fields. Yeah.
expense. And here it is. Again, export constant, create expense validator. Here we say wine compile. It's going to be an object with a property of title, wine.string dot min length 4. The amount, it should be a number with positive. Then we need a transaction date, which should be a date. And we need a category ID, which should be of type number. Yeah, I think that's all we need. One thing I want to check, are we, okay, yeah, this should be in camel case. Okay, so let's validate our form. And here we get our payload. We should await it. And here we have like all the information. So we have the title, we have amount, transaction date, and the category ID. So the very first thing we should do is like make sure that we have the category with this category ID. So find or fail. payload.category ID. If we have one, then we say category.related expenses. So this is like how you access a relationship instance. And then you want to say, I want to create a new expense with a title of payload.title, an amount of payload.amount, and the transaction date, payload.transaction date. Uh, so this transaction date, if I go to the expense model, is of type datetime, which comes from a datetime library called Luxon. And the one we get from the validator is a JavaScript date. So this thing is like a JavaScript date object. So we need to like transform it, which is really simple. Now we have expense created. Again, we can redirect the user back to the home page, and there we can like list the expenses. Let's even do that right now. Here we say expenses, and we say expense dot all, and here we will like list all the expenses. So
Cool.
let's
I
give
see
it a
this
try.
hash in your import paths.
Mm-hmm.
Is it analogous to at in Vue or something?
Yeah. So for a very long time, we did not have any aliases inside JavaScript. So these are like an alias for a directory. And the front end world, Webpack, Vue, they all came up with a thing called where they like prefix the aliases with at. In AdonisJS, we also had aliases, which were not using any symbol. So earlier it used to be like this model slash category. But now NodeJS has inbuilt support for aliases, which are defined inside the package.json file out here. So you say imports, and then here you like define all the aliases, and these are like supported by the Node.js runtime. You don't have to do anything
Nice.
special for them. And yeah, so essentially like that's what we are using.
Cool.
All right, so yeah, let's give it a try. I hope it will work. Broadband bill 1200. We paid it today in bills. Create an expense. We get an error that we don't have a table because we again forgot to run our migrations. Let's reload. Okay, so the redirect works. Now we just have to like render our expenses. Let's do that quickly. So here it is. I'm going to copy this. Let's create a dev. This should be inside a dev2. And expense from expenses. Here we'll say expense dot title dash expense dot amount, and you know what?
Maybe.
Yeah, I think let's structure it properly. Let's make it a h4 with ul li, and then we can have stuff like amount expense dot amount, copy category expense dot category. Right now we have category ID, but I'll show you how we can also fetch the related category. And then we want what else? We have transaction date. When did we make the payment? Okay, so this is what we have. Let's make title bit bold, font 2XL, maybe 3. Text.
Yeah.
Yeah. And give it some margin, empty 8. Okay, so this is all like we have expense, we have the amount, we have the category, which should be like the actual category name, and we can like also format the date to be a little nicer. So very first we need to pull in the expense. And for that, what we have to do is, if I go to this controller, the place where we are fetching all of our expenses, now instead of using this shorthand method, which is all, we are going to create a query builder instance so that we can use other methods that we have. And we are going to say that we want to preload the category for every expense. And yeah, that's pretty much all. So now what's happening is we are like getting all the expenses, and alongside them we are also getting their categories.
Okay.
And here I can comment, I can say category dot name, and here we get built.
Nice.
And like if you want to understand what sort of queries are running behind the scenes, let me quickly also show you that. Let's say debug true. So we are saying that we want to debug all the queries from this database connection. And once we enable debugging, Lucid will start emitting events related to queries that we can listen for. For now, I will like just write that code within this file. Ideally, you can like put it inside some different file. So db, and also pull in the emitter dot on db query db dot pretty print. And if you go to our terminal, we do a refresh. Here you can see that we are running a query where we are fetching the user where ID matches this, which is made by the auth package. Then we are pulling all the categories for this sidebar. Then we are pulling all the expenses. And then we are saying, okay, now we have the expenses, give us the categories for those expenses using a where in clause.
I was
And
expecting a join. Any reason why
yeah,
it's not a join? Or how can
so
we convert it to a join? Probably.
so join basically gives you a flat list. It doesn't give you a tree-like structure. Then you have to like loop over that like flat list and convert it into a tree. And with this, when we make a wherein clause, we have like two lists, and it's easy to like convert them into a tree. I'm not sure like who all make joins, but I'm pretty much sure like the Laravel ORM, they also use a wherein clause. And one more thing, like a lot of people think like two queries are bad, but essentially they are not. Very first, you are able to use indexes properly when you're like making different queries and joins. Sometimes, depending upon how complex the join is, you can miss an index. And second, these queries are made really quickly because they are using a warmed up connection. So in Lucid, we have like this connection pool where we have like the connections already warmed up. They have like made the TCP socket connection, and now all they have to do is like send the query, get the result back. So it's not that slow.
Cool. Makes sense.
And this
So yeah, the
debugging,
overhead of processing the data is, now I understand, like
yeah,
it is flat and then you have to process the columns and embed. Yeah, this way it's like just okay, take this and embed it into expenses. Cool.
yeah. And with the debugging information, like which model is making the query. So we have that here, and like which database connection is
Yeah, this
making the
is cool.
query.
So the user can basically keep this running and then
Yeah.
yeah, cool.
So yeah, this is where we have. Now we have to format it. I have to look into looks on docs because I don't remember.
Yeah, that's fine. That's the part of the job.
Yeah,
Referring
yeah.
documentation, right?
Yeah. So yeah, that's essentially how it looks like. I think we have covered a lot, unless you want me to touch on anything else. So we looked into how do you handle HTTP requests, like
Yeah,
the
I think
entire workflow.
we still have um like Unpoly left, I
Oh yeah,
guess.
that's true.
Yeah.
Wow, was such a big thing.
Yeah, let's cover. If you are not like want to run for some meeting, I am available for like we can extend it for 20-25 minutes if that will cover.
Yeah, yeah. I think I can do that. Okay, so I've
Sure.
just installed Unpoly, and
Cool. Let's
now
do
we
it.
have to start using
No
it.
worries.
So let's import Unpoly. Like that's the only thing you have to do with Unpoly. You are not writing any front-end JavaScript. You're just using HTML directives to basically have smoother navigation. Now, if we go to our layout file, what we can do is, so right now Unpoly doesn't do anything. Like if I go, you can see I'm like doing full page reloads because this thing like flashes on the top, if you notice. Now with Unpoly, what we can do is we can say, I want this link to say up follow. Now up follow says Unpoly, okay, you should be like following this link and hijack its navigation. And then we have, I think this alone should do it. If not, we might have to add one more attribute. Okay, now if we go to, yeah, so that does the job. So if you notice, we don't get any flash inside the tab bar as I'm like switching between these pages. It's like pretty much, so we get like this smooth navigation. Just to verify it, let's say, I think it does replace everything by default, if I'm not wrong. Yeah, it doesn't. So I like just change the header color to red, and you can notice like it stays red. It's not like re-rendering the header. It's just re-rendering the parts which have been changed between two page navigations. So this is like the really basic thing you can do with Unpoly. Once you have built your standard application, you can just drop it in, and now you have like really quick, faster navigation right out of the box. You don't have to like write any fancy front-end JavaScript or use front-end routers.
Cool,
But
makes sense.
yeah, now let's say we also want these form renders to be, like tracked by Unpoly. So let's do that as well. Let's go to their docs.
Okay.
Okay, I'm just going to look into how the forms are handled. Form up submit. Yeah, so we have to use, instead of up follow, we have to say up submit. And same with our categories page. We say up submit. And now these forms like doesn't cause any navigation. They are like just rendering in line.
Makes sense. So does this have something like, I was reading HTML docs and they have something, okay, you can replace this part of the page with whatever response comes back from the server.
Yeah, so they have that thing called like up target, like which part you want to replace.
Okay.
So here you can say, when I click on this link, I want the contents of .content class should be replaced. This will stay as it is, but this one will get replaced.
Nice. Hey Alberto, I didn't know you were here. Welcome back.
So and you can also like tell multiple targets. So you can say, okay, I want to change like multiple fragments on a page. I want to use a div with class content, another div with class unread count, and maybe means if this div doesn't exist, just ignore
Okay.
the replacement. You like don't throw an error or anything like that.
Makes sense.
So yeah, essentially like this is how it works. We have a very simple application, so we can like we can't do really fancy things. We can only hijack these navigations and then these form updates. But in complex applications, you can like change specific parts of the app, or if you want to like poll the server and keep on updating some part of the application, you can do that using up poll. They also got like what's it like dependent form validation, where you have like one field. Once you validate that field, you want to pull in the rest of the information. And a great example of that is, let's say you have a list of countries. Once you select a country, then you want to like populate the states.
Makes
Uh,
sense. Based on that
so
country.
yeah. So you can also do that, where when a user selects a country, a request will go to the backend. You can validate if the selected country is valid, and in response, you can return back a new select box with the list of states, and they will get rendered in the form.
Cool, makes sense.
So yeah, uh, I think that's pretty much all I wanted to show.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, we got like we covered how do you handle requests using routes, controllers, how do you use Lucid to create rows, fetch rows, how you I like use REPL to interact with your application, how do you authenticate a user, and how do you like prevent your apps from timing attacks. We also looked into validation and the template
Mm-hmm.
engine,
Yeah,
which I think
covered a lot
is
of
like
ground. Yeah,
really, yeah, really good for a crash course.
makes sense. So one last thing, like on your Twitter profile, I see the links to Wine, Edge, and there is one thing called Zappa.dev.
Oh yeah, that's a testing framework,
Okay.
and uh,
The um, treasure continues, right? Treasure of
yeah,
packages you have.
yeah. Again, the same thing continues. So let me actually like take you to the Java docs, and I can talk about it. I'm not sure like how much people can relate with it, but it's like a very logical thing, reasoning behind creating all this. So there are a few things. If I like just go through the description here, it says Java comes with everything you need to test your backend applications. So we have like this emphasis on backend and not testing every other kind of application that can be written in JavaScript. So let's say uh, Jest is not like that popular anymore. Like a lot of people are migrating away from it, but I still consider it's like widely used. If we talk about Jest, and then there is Whitest, which uses wheat under the hood.
Mm-hmm.
Now, both of these testing frameworks are great, but they have additional overhead of transpiling your source code. Whereas when you're building a backend application, you don't have to transpile your source code. Like no one does that. People don't transpile Ruby when they are running the Ruby code. People don't transpile PHP when they are running the PHP code. In the
Mm-hmm.
same way, Node.js have everything. Like they have like all the JavaScript APIs within the platform, so you don't have to compile it or minify it or bundle it. And when you're using these testing frameworks, they are behind the scenes transpiling your source code,
Mm-hmm.
which no matter like how fast the transpiler is, it's always going to have some overhead, and sometimes it can make debugging harder because your code is like going through a pipeline. So
Mm-hmm.
Java doesn't do that because we don't like care about front end apps. If you are writing a Vue app, you cannot use Java, but you can use Whitest for that.
Mm-hmm. So this is
That's like
solely for testing the backend part of it.
Yeah. Now, since we don't use any build tools or any transpilers, Java can like work with any backend, like runtime that you have. So if you wanted to use it like directly with Node, you can do that. If
Mm-hmm.
you're using TypeScript and ESM, you can use that. You don't need like any special CLI from Java for that. Even if you're like using Bun, you can use it. So it like just works. So this is like the reason for having Java, and then this is like what features you get with it, which is like not really, I would say, different from other testing frameworks. Like I think a lot of them have the similar features, but the
Mm-hmm.
core philosophy is different.
Makes sense.
And then we also have like this really nice VS Code extension that you can use to run your test from within the VS Code.
Nice. This looks good. Who doesn't like green checks, right?
Yeah,
Green checks
everyone.
are cool. Cool, I think we covered a lot of stuff. I think this is great material for anyone who want to get started on with building with Adonis. And any resources you want to share for going deeper further with this?
I think if you're just getting started, you haven't used Adonis ever, and you don't want to like get lost into docs and understand all the concepts,
Mm-hmm.
you can go to this website called Aerocast. So I think we have it mentioned within the docs somewhere.
So is it by someone from the community or core team?
Yeah, it is. No, this is from a guy called Tom. He like created a dedicated website for AdonisJS where he like does all these screencasts. He also like created 15 lessons already for Adonis 6. So if you go to
Nice.
this
So this
website, you
is
can
kind of
like
like
start.
Lara casts. Okay.
Yeah, that's like the basic
Nice.
idea. And you can like start watching these videos. He also like has a really nice monetization model where if you are a subscriber, you can watch the videos right away. But if you're not paying, after 13 days, those videos will be free for everyone. So if you can like, so if you don't want to pay, you can wait a bit. You will like get access to these videos for free within 13 days.
Okay, so like whoever is paying gets access before 13 days. Kind of like
Yeah,
that.
so you get access like right away. So right now on this it says if you want to access it for free, you have to like wait for 10 days. But if I'm a paying subscriber, I get access to it right away.
Mhm. One more like monetization model that I came across recently was okay, basically, here is the course, like here is the number of sponsors we need to make it free. So when that
Yeah,
reaches
sponsor
that,
where.
yeah, so 10 sponsors, it becomes free for everyone.
Yeah,
That was
yeah.
also kind of nice, I guess.
Yeah, that's a nice way to basically like have a close community where people, like who are heavily invested into your project, they get access to things right away. But then it doesn't, like stop rest of the people to have it in the
Yeah,
in the
accessible.
future.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, do check out Adocasts. So
Yeah.
I'll
So
drop
this
a
is like a
link
nice
as well in
way.
the description if someone wants. But yeah, now
And
like yeah, you were saying. Go ahead.
yeah, and once you like know the basics of the framework from these tutorials, like just hop into documentation, just go through everything. I think it's pretty clear. It will explain you what different modules are, what they are doing, how they work. And again, if you face any issues, just like go to one of these links. Either you can get into the Discord server and you can chat with other folks using AdonisJS, or you can go to GitHub discussions to like create a proper discussion thread and ask for help. And if you just want to know what we are doing, then I think Twitter is the best way to know about that.
Cool. So there was one last question before we get to review framework website, but where was it? Cool. Let me find that out. Okay, when is the official Inertia JS adapter is getting a setup guide on docs? I saw npm packages I created, tried it, but requires some extra stuff.
Yeah, I think we talked about it a few times on different channels. So Julian, who is like part of the core team, he's like working on the inertia adapter. We don't have like a specific date because we don't, like work with dates or any deadline. But our main focus right now is to get V6 into stable state, so that if we are finding any bugs, if there are any lapses in the documentation, fixing that. Then we haven't migrated some of the packages from V5 to work with V6. Then we are going to do that. And then the immediate, I would say, focus of Julian is going to be to work on the inertia adapter with like official integration and docs and everything. I can't commit a date, but easily expect like it to be coming in February, if not that, maybe early March. That's like kind of a rough idea. Don't take it like a word that okay, that's the day when it will come out.
Cool. I hope that answers your question, Rahul. So yeah, now up to yeah. So like as I requested to review the framework docs, so you
Yeah,
can search for Frappe framework and you'll get the link.
sure. If it's possible, can I like take a 2 minute break if that
Yeah,
works?
it
Or
works. It
you
works.
think
It works. Cool.
cool? Let me
I will also grab
come back in
something to drink.
yeah,
Yeah.
sure. I'll come back
Cool.
in 2 minutes.
Cool. Yeah.
Uh, you guys have another website, like not for Frappe, but
Yeah, so the Frappe website is
it's for
different. So that's
something.
the company website. And the framework website is this. So this is actually the web development framework that we have built. So this is no code, low code,
Yeah,
batteries included framework that we use to build other products that we have in specific ERP next.
cool. Between I saw this website. I really like the layout and all the information that you have like
Yeah, we recently on
gotten.
I think first Jan released this new website.
Yeah, I think like whoever came up with this idea, it's really nice. Very first, it's like really fresh, so it's not following all the uh, like design trends,
Dark,
and also
the
yeah,
dark
layout
theme,
is really
layout
nice.
theme.
Like putting the products up front to show like what's all there, and then this sidebar navigation. It's
Yeah,
really
if you
cool.
go to the first page, my
I
my favorite is the first one. So if you click on table of contents, right? Yeah, this one.
Yeah, this is really nice. Yeah, this is really nice, and also like taking all the time to write all this stuff. Yeah, it's really
Yeah,
cool.
it's like
Uh,
still work in progress, but yeah, we are getting there.
cool. Yeah, I really like this website. And I think I looked at it when I was working on the AdonisJS website. I did not want to like copy paste this layout because otherwise would have felt like uh, a copy of something,
But
which is
yeah,
really
still
nice.
like an artist, right?
Yeah,
Pick what you love and then add your own jazz, maybe.
cool. So we are going through the website and the documentation both, right?
Yeah, yeah, just click on, I think, yeah, you can go over the page and then we can click on get started. So that takes, I think, to the docs, actual docs.
Okay. I'll just like go through it and see because I haven't used it. I'll just like use this stream right now just to get a hang of it and see what
Sure, sure.
exactly Frappe does. I roughly know that it's a framework that you guys use to build the products, as you said. So it's metadata first. Frappe, everything in Frappe is a doc type. Doc types can be defined easily without code, used everywhere. Okay, that makes sense. So there is an admin user interface, and there are rules and permissions that are applied out of the box on all interactions. Then you got a job scheduler running in Python. You got a REST API plus webhooks. Okay, it's extensible. You got socket IO. You got email setup, and then there is multi-tenancy inbuilt into the framework. Okay, got a ORM. Then there is a form builder. There is file-based routing. There are background jobs. Okay. How does it look like to deploy an app built with Frappe framework? Because I think like you guys are like doing quite a few things. I'm not sure if it's like I can pick and choose what I need or if it's everything inside it. So I
So,
will be like interested to know, for example, if socket.io is there by default, that means I need to have a server that has Node and Python both. And if there is a job scheduler, then maybe I also need like some sort of Redis database. I'm not sure if you like do it inside databases like SQL databases as well. And maybe uh, I need something that listens for webhooks if it's not my default application installation. So yeah, how does the deployment look like?
so it's like everything comes out of the box. So there is no separate pieces. So there are like two setups you can take. Either you can go the Docker way and it like comes up with all the containers. So like core three pieces are there. One is the Python app itself, the app server or the web server, and second is Redis. So we have multiple instances of Redis. So one is for caching, one is for talking to socket IO, and the third is for job scheduling.
Okay.
Yeah. So if like there is a separate what do you say setup guide once you get started, but yeah, it's like uh, a few steps as you said. Like you need Node and you need Python, you need
Yeah.
Redis.
Okay, cool. Just wanted to, and I think like I am just assuming. I haven't like looked deeply into it. I think you have like these different layers. Maybe you tell people like to start with the metadata one first, where you are actually not writing code, but you're using like these doc types to do I would
Yeah, so
say,
doc type is
common tasks.
basically a database model.
Okay.
So in our case, it will be expense and category. So these two will be doc types.
Okay.
And
Okay.
so what you added validations in a separate step, right? Here
Mm-hmm.
you can basically say, okay, this field will be read only, or it will be only visible when this condition is satisfied, a JavaScript expression kind of. So this is what we call the metadata of that doc type.
Okay. Okay. Then you got tutorial.
Yeah,
So I
you were
think,
mentioning something about the tutorial. So now our docs is mostly tutorials at the start, and then there are some pieces that are actually technical talks.
yeah, which I think is fine. Like as I said,
Mm-hmm.
I've seen it in many places. Like even your docs
Mm-hmm.
are like really big, but you still got a tutorial
Mm-hmm.
in here. Uh, I like for some reason prefer to have like separation.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's because I also think of having like multiple tutorials and not just one.
Mm-hmm.
One can be like building some sort of an API, another one can be building a server rendered app, and then maybe another tutorial that like takes you to the proper ways you can do authentication. So that's like how I'm thinking about tutorials, and I think
Mm-hmm.
let's have like a separate place where we can put all of them versus in the docs. But I think yeah, it's fine, and tutorial is like kind of needed if you want like newbies to come in and start using anything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, makes sense. Till now, this has served a very good purpose. So, if you ask anybody in the community what app they built first, was this library management app mostly, because that's
Yeah,
what
agree.
the tutorial starts. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so bench is like what we have ace, which is a command
Yeah.
line tool.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a CLI tool to orchestrate your Frappe stuff.
And uh, and is it like installed globally on my machine?
Yeah, so Bench basically creates a Python virtual environment. So Bench is installed globally, but it creates isolated environments for each
Okay.
Frappe installation, you can say.
Okay. The reason I was asking is
Mm-hmm.
just to like understand the difference between this and Ace. So in Ace, as I
Mm-hmm.
install new packages, they can also
Mm-hmm.
register commands with Ace. Do you like follow the same concept? If
Yeah.
uh,
So we have
okay,
something called commands, so they can extend the CLI. Okay. Some
okay,
app can bring their own commands.
okay,
So
makes
what we
sense.
have is many of the commands live with the core app itself. So instead of in the bench, they live in the app, so we can easily update and push. So the commands get
Cool.
updated.
Okay, create an app. Before we start, make sure you are in a bench directory. Confirm that bench front is a bench directory. Makes sense. Create a new library management app. So new. Here you ask me so many questions about the
Yeah, the app
title.
itself. Mhm.
Mhm. So you got
So there are two
hooks.
pieces to this. Like one is the no code, low code way. So you can just spin up a Frappe instance without
Mhm.
going into code ever. So you get a fresh site, right? There are no apps, just the pure framework. And then you can go the low code, no code way. So you have
Okay.
like you can drag and drop build the doc types, and in the site itself you can write some scripts for stuff. So that's one part. And the second is when you want to actually build an app, maybe with a React front end or something like that, then you go into building apps.
Okay. Makes sense.
So we use Jinja for templating.
Yeah. Jinja is I think really popular. We also got something similar in Node.js called Nunjucks,
Mm-hmm.
which is inspired by Jinja, but again, it's not like maintained anymore because
Yeah, for example, this
it's not.
screenshot, right? The screenshot is from version 12 or 11, if I'm not wrong. And right now, the current version is version 15. So the docs needs a solid revamp. Uh,
And
but yeah.
like, is there any reason like nobody decided to update it? Because if I look at it, Again, I'm just like saying it from my point of view without knowing any specifics. If I know like the framework is getting so many updates, I know this is the thing. I will like maybe take out a day just to make a list of things which needs to be updated, and then as I get time, I will like start doing that and check off the tasks. Is there any like reason that nobody decided to update the screenshot or?
So these are like kind of inside the tutorial, right? So whoever created the tutorial, maybe he's still there, he's not there actively looking at the documentation, or not in the framework team. So that might be one reason. So usually the part which gets updated, right? Those screenshots get updated, but this part where only UI changes have appeared, or like not actually the feature has changed, this part remain as is. But in my opinion, this should be overall with the major version at least, right?
Yeah. Also, again, I'm not sure if like having a different site makes sense or not, because it reminded me of a thing that we just removed from the documentation called cookbooks. So what we did is like we had this documentation, and then we thought, okay, if you want to teach people like some really simple things which are like not part of the framework, we can like create cookbooks from there for them, and we can also ask the people from community to do it. And they were also like suffering from the same thing. They were not up to date, and essentially they were not even supposed to be up to date, because someone came in, they let's say have a knowledge about Docker, and they like uh, created a cookbook that shows you how you can use Docker to Dockerize a certain version of AdonisJS. Then they moved on, and the cookbook is supposed to be stay in the same way. But since the cookbook was in the documentation, people had this expectation that it has to be up to date. Now we decided to get rid of cookbooks and just write blog posts. So if someone wants to write a blog post on Docker, they can come in, they can write it. And I think usually people have this understanding that uh, articles on a blog are
Maybe
written.
out of date.
Yeah,
Makes
they are
sense.
like written in a specific point of time. They are not updated. Like if someone wrote an article, they are not updating that article as a new framework gets released. So expectation is like more clear on their front, and also we are not guilty that these things are not up to date.
So I recently started working on a new documentation site. So if you go to like Build with Hussain, if you search and go to the website, I think I can share a link as well. But yeah, click on that, the first link. Scroll down. I think so. Roll down. I think Frappeware section. Scroll down. I'll tell you when it comes. So
Okay.
it's really hidden now because it's work in progress. Yeah. Click on the missing Frappe manual. Second column, second link. Yeah. So click on start reading. Yeah, this is the new that I have started working on. And
Mhm.
this has like multiple installation ways, Docker, this, that, and training. And then there is cookbook, which you were talking about. So I recently
Yeah.
started adding cookbooks because people were asking, okay, how to do this small stuff with that, and like some examples
Yeah.
would help, right? So that, and I added cheat sheets as well.
Yeah. Yeah, again, it's tricky. Like you have to find a balance. We found like it's really uh, difficult for us to keep like cookbooks maintained. Second, again, this has like more to also do with the JavaScript ecosystem. Right now, a lot of people want to know how they can use JSX instead of Edge, and we are planning to write an article on that. Now,
Okay.
if you were going through the cookbooks, like route, and if the cookbooks have to be stay up to date, then we can like we write a cookbook on GSX, but maybe after 2 years, people think GSX is not cool anymore. And since it's on the official documentation, we are recommending people to use GSX, and they will be like saying, okay, GSX is not uh, cool cool anymore, or maybe the library we used to teach how to use GSX is not maintained anymore. So it kind of adds a lot of burden on us that we don't want to do, This is the reason like we decided to go with blog posts. We'll teach you
Makes
how to
sense.
use JSX. Maybe after 2 years, the person who like wrote this JSX library is not interested in maintaining it. It's fine. You learned about that thing that time. If you want, maybe we will write another article, or if not, it's fine.
Makes sense. Yeah, so I'm like at the point of figuring out the structure. So your this tutorial should say stay separate kind of inside clicked kind of with me that okay, this makes sense.
Yeah, and maybe like you can also see how other communities are doing it, and
Mm-hmm.
if they have it like up to date, or if they
Mm-hmm.
have like written any material on how they do it.
Mm-hmm.
I
Makes
have
sense.
like followed Laravel closely, and also
Mm-hmm.
like Rails, and they both are pretty much the same. They just focus on the code documentation, and rest of the pieces are like outsourced
Mm-hmm.
on the side. Like even with Laravel, if you want a tutorial, they have like a different website for that called Bootcamp. Yeah, so the tutorial is like this thing.
Okay, so the tutorial is maintained separately and the docs, like the actual code documentation is separate.
Yeah, so they are like mainly focused on keeping the docs up to date, and then they have this tutorial, which again I cannot speak on their behalf, but
Mm-hmm.
essentially, if it's me, I think this can go out of sync for a while.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe like we released a version, but the tutorial is not up to date. We do it 2 weeks after that, or maybe one month after that.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
Cool, cool, cool. So yeah, in terms of deploying like Adonis, what's your like recommended way, or how
Uh,
do you go about it? Or simple P2 works.
yeah, that's how like I do it. I basically use a service called Cleaver.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, so if I search Cleaver, so Cleaver is like the simplest way to automate your deployments,
Mm-hmm.
and also like use your infrastructure. So what they
Mm-hmm.
do is, once you log into their app, they will like let you connect a server from
Mm-hmm.
different providers. So I use DigitalOcean. I can go to DigitalOcean. I can create an API key. I
Mm-hmm.
put it inside Cleaver, and then they will be able to like create servers on like create droplets on my behalf. And then I will tell them, okay, take this app, create a droplet in DigitalOcean for let's say like $6,
Mm-hmm.
and run this app over there.
Mm-hmm.
And then from there on, they will create a droplet. So I still like own the infrastructure. I can
Mm-hmm.
anytime log into to my droplet, like I can SSH into it, and I can change anything I want.
Mm-hmm.
But then I use Cleaver as a way to do the deployments. Anytime I commit, they will look at the changes, they will build my app, and they will deploy it on my droplet. So this is like kind of a bridge between my code and my server.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I do.
Mm-hmm.
I
This is
also
kind of
see
like
like
Laravel Forge, right? The Forge.
yeah, exactly. So they also have like a
Yeah, your testimonial is at the center. Nice.
yeah, and they also like sponsor the framework. So I just want to make sure people that they also
Mm-hmm.
sponsor the
So how
framework.
does the pricing look like? Is it like a fixed pricing per month or something like that?
Yeah, it's really cheap. It's like 5.5 per month, and you own the infrastructure, so you still have to like pay for DigitalOcean. This is like just for that convenience layer they give you,
Hmm.
so that you're not
Makes
like
sense.
writing scripts yourself.
So any plan
So
on having some SaaS platform for Adonis uh, that
I
can?
am
Mm-hmm.
like not interested in building anything related to deployment. The ecosystem is really crowdy.
Mm-hmm.
You might like spend more than a year building something, and you will end up with a very basic version of everything that's already out there. It's like a very crowded market.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't have any plans on that front. I
Mm-hmm.
want to do few courses, few paid packages,
Mm-hmm.
and see how that goes. And
Mm-hmm.
then on the basis of that, I'll decide like how the future looks like.
Cool, makes sense. I have been following up, like following you on Twitter, and I've seen you have been preparing some content and for the course, I guess, right?
Yeah, yeah. You're planning to like start working on the on a beginner's course from next month itself.
Awesome. Sounds awesome. So I'll stop your screen share. So
Okay.
yeah, anything that you want to discuss? I think questions are over. So Hacker Rahul had the last comment. He says, at least please add a readme till then.
I'll ask Julian for that.
Cool. Anything else? I think there was one appreciation, right? Hey, so Adam says, hey Harminder, thanks a lot for this beautiful framework.
Okay. Thank you so much for appreciating it.
Yep. Cool. Yeah, thanks Harminder for joining and saying yes for this collaboration. I hope you enjoyed this as well, because I did. And
Yeah. I absolutely did.
cool. And thanks for taking, like, special thanks for taking extra time to review the, giving a quick review on the framework website
Sure.
docs.
Cool. Thank you so much
Cool.
for bringing me in and letting me like actually present AdonisJS to everyone.
Awesome. It's a cool framework. Yeah.
Thank you.
Cool then. Anything else you want to add or to the audience?
I think we are all good. That's pretty much all. I also shared people how they can ask for help, how they can start learning AdonisJS, how they can follow us on Twitter. So yeah, we are all good.
Cool. Goodbye, everyone. I'll see you on Monday with Dharmesh for the episode 5 of ERP Next series. And bye bye. Have a nice day, everyone. Thanks, Harminder, once again. Bye.
Thank you so much. See ya.